Hi everyone, welcome to the session. This is Student Attitudes Towards Zoom for Learning. I'd like to acknowledge the rest of our research team from University of Adelaide and QUT. The study aims were to identify which factors that influence student attitudes and behaviours towards Zoom in class, and which ones might be new or emerging, and to suggest insights for evolving practice, because we all know that we have seen changes in student engagement patterns over the last year and a half. And so we wanted to find out, take stock of what was important to students. We connected this to previous research. In 2019, myself, Edward Palmer and Peter Strelan published a taxonomy of factors that affect user behaviours and intentions to use educational technologies. And in that taxonomy, there are 7 primary taxonomic groups, 2 of which, instructional attributes and cognitive engagement, relate directly to educational technologies, and the other 5 relate to technologies in general. And so we thought these were the known constructs, and so we surveyed students and expected to relate their responses back to this taxonomy, but we're also curious, and we suspected that there might be others that this taxonomy didn't cover because of the new situation. And so we asked 169 students enrolled in Psychology 1 at the University of Adelaide in semester 2 last year. This was not a time of lockdown for students at that campus, so it's good to know that context. We asked 4 questions. The first one was designed to elicit what positive aspects students saw about Zoom. The second one was designed to find out what negative aspects or bugbears students had about using Zoom for learning. And the third one was about exploring how instructor practice and how educators manage Zoom itself in the class, how that might be affecting student attitudes. And fourthly, what else that we haven't covered in those 3 other questions that students want to tell us. And so the method we used was we used in vivo to thematically code. The code has got above 90% agreement on all coded items. The themes were grouped according to the known primary taxonomic groups that I've just shown you. And any that didn't relate to those themes, we set aside and put into a theme later on where possible. And we were able to do that. We did find some that fit into a new theme. And then from there, we fine-tuned the responses in those themes to specific learnings. So we had 8 emergent themes. The first 4 relate to instructional attributes or teaching and learning directly. And the first one, the engagement with learning, is engagement with the learning material and the content, and in terms of the cognitivism, the cognitive psychology of learning, and interaction with and engagement with other people, students and tutors and educators are covered by class interaction, feedback and information exchange. And we also see that instructor practice is important to students. So how the educator uses Zoom and manages the class within Zoom is also important to students. We also found social comfort and well-being was a new construct that wasn't covered by our previous taxonomy. And social comfort is a term that we coined to describe the idea of being comfortable simply by being with others. And this has benefits in learning, as other qualitative studies have found, and it came up with this study as well. So in this study, it's a neutral construct, so it can be positive or negative. A huge number of the students responded that they prefer being able to go into class and interact with other classmates. However, on the other side of the coin, some said that Zoom is preferable because they don't have to meet other people. And for whatever reason, and there are some reasons that come out in our study as to why that might be the case. In terms of well-being, the response is really centered around physical and mental health. On the positive side of it, I really appreciate this comment by a student who said that I am physically disabled, so using Zoom in replacement of face-to-face has been great. And also in terms of COVID, if I am sick, it is preferred in this current environment to keep me safe and others safe, the social distancing side of things. It'll be interesting to see if this continues when the risk of the pandemic is really reduced. Now, on the other side of it, the negative side of well-being is that someone with social anxiety, the mic and camera aspects can be panic attacks. And it can also extend to other forms of anxiety or other mental health issues, negative health issues surrounding use of a virtual classroom for a lot of the day or a lot of the time or for social interaction. So getting into what students say about their own experience, there are three main themes. One is that they prefer the face-to-face social experience, but they recognise that Zoom is very convenient for them in terms of being able to access their learning whenever they want or whenever they can, so they can access from home and don't have to come in to university or on campus. And the reason they prefer face-to-face physical experience is because it feels isolating to not be able to do that. The other two themes are really interesting and go hand in hand. They want more interaction and engagement, but at the same time, their peers are not interacting and engaging. And we need to work out why this is. And I suspect this is the reason for this is one of the things we really need to address. Implications for this are mainly that we need to develop new ways of building social norms and connections to complement face-to-face interactions instead of replace them. So if you think of Zoom as a virtual classroom, it is a different environment compared to a tutorial room or a lecture room. And so it would come with new capabilities or new aspects that we wouldn't have in a face-to-face environment. And I suspect that we might get success if we look at ways of building social connections within this new virtual space that people are forced to use now, or is much more a part of our learning and teaching, than if we just look at the face-to-face interactions and try and put them into the virtual space. So I think the two types of interactions might be complementary. In terms of engagement and interaction, as educators, we need to retrain ourselves how to coach students to engage and interact. We're still learning. And in terms of peers and students not interacting with each other, it's an opportunity to also look at other reasons why peers might not be actively engaging in an online classroom or a classroom in general. These might include, well, I think we have a Western bias in the way we look at things and how we presume that interaction engagement looks this way. It looks like someone putting themselves forward to discuss their idea in front of the class, to maybe challenge other students or teacher and to put their opinion forward. And I think there's a lot of evidence to say that this is not a universal cultural norm across the world. A lot of our students are from different, varying cultures, and this is now an opportunity to consider these and consider our paradigm of interaction and engagement. Doing this might help a lot more students interact than what we had before. So about educators, overwhelmingly, students want educators to be competent in using Zoom and to proactively manage the classroom within Zoom, including managing student engagement behaviour. And the other practical theme that came up from students is that students want educators to design for Zoom, not just teach face-to-face classes through Zoom. So it indicates that it's probably not directly translatable, especially if it's a lecture. Lectures in face-to-face classrooms or tutorials have different flavours if you're not physically with other people. And so students are picking up on this and they're saying, look at Zoom specifically and design for what Zoom can do, and then teach accordingly. Now, the implications of this are in terms of competency and use of Zoom to manage the class, we need to plan the interactive lesson and practice a dry run with a colleague. And even to do a dry run with yourself in a student role to see what the students experience. As well as designing for Zoom, this really lends itself to the constructivist paradigm as opposed to a more didactic And the constructivist approach does lend itself to people interacting and picking up information from others and from different bits and pieces of content and so on, and forming a picture. So this is probably more relevant to tutorials than lectures on Zoom. So as a learning designer, I would never put the content first. And so this is where we can say, what learning experience do I want my students to experience to go through when they are learning? How can I do that in Zoom? And then put in the content, don't start with the content. About Zoom itself, students are saying that Zoom is very convenient. However, there are reduced social cues in virtual classrooms that students are missing, and I think is a huge part of the problem that leads on to other areas, other problem areas. And also that screen sharing is a problem. So if an educator might be using 2 screens, for example, or a big screen, and quite happily teaching and not knowing that the students are having an experience on a smaller laptop screen that is less than optimal, and maybe not seeing all the features that students are seeing on that one little screen. And so in terms of implications, we can expect students to keep using Zoom if given the opportunity. So even though you might have a lecture scheduled, a physical lecture scheduled, and Zoom link at the same time, you're going to expect some students to use Zoom. And it might change from week to week depending on the circumstance. Someone might have a job right after the lecture or something like that, okay? The social cues in the virtual classrooms, I think we need to deliberately design and explore new ways of connecting and fostering new norms of connecting, because if students are not engaging, it's because something is broken. I think that's one of the main causes, is the social construct has been nuked pretty much. It does have confounders with COVID and everything. So we need to explore what is relevant there, what's important to us, what can we do within these virtual classroom environments. That might be different to what we did before, but we do need to look into this. And I think finding out what those new social norms are and how to connect people in those spaces will be key to increasing student engagement. And I've mentioned the screen sharing problem previously, and it really means that instructors need to put themselves in the position of a one-screen student and plan accordingly. So summarising, we see that most students prefer face-to-face learning because of the social connection, but at other times they will prefer the convenience of Zoom and to learn where they want to, where they're able to. Students want the instructor to be competent and to take control and to design their learning for the Zoom environment. Students want more interaction and engagement, and so we need to find new ways of supporting students to interact, and this includes taking into account the diverse student cohorts. And health and wellbeing is a two-way street. Some students are better served by learning through Zoom, whereas other students are better served by learning in person. So in terms of research going forward, we have some areas, some things to discover here. My supposition is that we need to take a step back. We're in a new space. We need to discover what's important in this new space. What do we have anything new that we didn't have before that is impacting student behaviour and even our own behaviour? And so we need to disengage from our previous research inertia and see what's important, and then investigate how those things relate. So we need to refactor previous social norms to suit the new environment. We need to retrain ourselves as social facilitators within this space. We need to support diverse students to interact and actively think about their experience and what might be suitable for them. And I think underlying all of this, the key is to probably move away from teaching through Zoom towards communicating through Zoom. So that's our presentation. If you have any questions or comments.